Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 1 Kings, the 9th chapter. Okay, and as we went through in the 8th chapter, a bulk of it was going into King Solomon's prayer, right, to the Most High concerning Israel, and then at that present time and in the future, right, if we were ever to find ourselves in a situation that was not suitable for us, and we turned back with our whole heart to the Lord and prayed to him that he should hear our prayers, right, and grant us mercy. So 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 1. And it came to pass, when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord Yahweh, and the king's house, which is Solomon's house, and all Solomon's desire which he pleased to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time, as he had appeared unto him at Gibeon. And that was when he appeared to Solomon at Gibeon, was when he asked Solomon what it is that Solomon wanted, right? And Solomon mentioned how he wanted wisdom to judge the nation of Israel. And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, meaning the temple, to put my name there forever, and mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me, as thy father David walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness. When it means to walk before me, it means to conduct your life, right? Live according to the ways of the Lord, meaning, follow the things and the ways that are pleasing to the Lord is how you would conduct yourself and you would live your life. That is what it means to walk before the Lord, as, well, in this case, David walked before the Lord, right? So everything you did, was, as I mentioned, you had integrity, right? Uprightness, right? Doing what was right, not trying to do things behind closed doors, and all of these things here. To do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments. Then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. And this is contingent upon the fact that they would continue to walk after the ways of the Lord, right, and follow the ways that were pleasing to the Heavenly Father. Verse 6, but if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them. All right. So if you don't adhere to this, and at some point, you get comfortable, or, you get lackadaisical, or whatever the case is, you get complacent, and you end up following and worshiping these other gods, then that's it for you. You've basically broken that contract. Then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name will I cast out of my sight. So remember, right, that we are now in the book of 1 Kings, right? Time of King Solomon, ending of King David's time into King Solomon's reign. And this all predates the subsequent chapters that we went into, right? The book of Jeremiah, the book of Ezekiel, the book of Daniel, Habakkuk, all of that is post after this time that we're in. Okay, so we sort of went back in time a bit. And so the Lord did stick to his word here, because we know that in process of time, King Solomon ended up himself, right, serving these other gods. And what that led to was, and even though this was happening in Israel, this became more prevalent, a heavy presence of idolatry within the nation. And that ended up leading to the Lord doing this that he said in verse 7, right, that he would cut Israel off out of the land. Well, the from King Solomon's time on down, you had the Babylonians that the Lord sent. And what did they do? They came, they besieged Israel, Jerusalem, broke through the walls, killed Israelites and took a bulk of them captives out of the land. Same thing happened with the northern kingdom, with the Assyrians. But more prevalent during the time of the Babylonian captivity was also, as the Lord mentioned here, that he said, "And this house which I have hallowed, being the temple for my name, will I cast out of my sight. And Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people." So that is what the Lord ended up doing as a result of our disobedience, right? The temple was destroyed, right? The wall was broken down, it was burnt. And you read in the book of Daniel, you read in the book of Ezekiel, you read in the book of Lamentations, how we became a byword and a proverb amongst all the people. And we lamented and complained about it, but this was something the Lord warned us about, and we ended up, right, doing it anyway. Verse 8, "And at this house, which is high, everyone that passeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss, and shall say, Why hath the Lord Yahweh done thus unto this land, and to this house?" Right? So when they see the destruction that's going to happen for your disobedience, if you disobey the Lord, they're going to be surprised. They're going to be, shook, wondering why would the Most High have possibly done this? What could have possibly happened here to lead to this? "And they shall answer, Because they forsook the Lord Yahweh their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods, and have worshipped them, and served them. Therefore hath the Lord Yahweh brought upon them all this evil." And it came to pass at the end of 20 years, when Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord Yahweh, and the king's house, which is Solomon's house. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, had furnished Solomon with cedar trees and fir trees, and with gold, according to all his desire. Right, and this is something that we dealt with. Right, we covered in the previous chapters. That then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. And Hiram came out of Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. So when he saw the cities, he didn't like him too much for, whatever reason, right? Maybe the cities the soil wasn't too fertile, or whatever the case is. Hiram didn't really like them. And he said, "What cities are these that thou hast given me, my brother?" And he called them the land of Kabul unto this day. So this is something that he didn't like, right? And it's not like Hiram ended up, I don't like them, and now I have beef with you, and you don't ever call me again, lose my number. And it's not what ended up happening, right? Of course, you would have to still accept them. Kabul said here, according to the blue letter, the definition here is binding. Okay, like you have like a binding vow, right? Something that, we understand what binding means. He contemptuously called Kabul by Hiram. So he's like, he took it in the displeasure of his heart, and that's why he called it such. And Hiram sent to the king 60 talents of gold. Now remember, verse 13, verse 14, verse 12. This is still in the passage of time. Okay, it's not like verse 12 happened, or verse 11 happened, and then right the next day Solomon gives Hiram 20 cities. Then that same day he sees and he doesn't like it, and he calls it Kabul. And then the next 6 hours later he sends 60 talents of gold. No, this is in process of time. Okay, verse 15. And this is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord Yahweh, and his own house, and Millo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. So these were cities, let's just say buildings, architectures, projects that Solomon built. And the levy, which is going to be the people, right, the labor, right, that was required to build these things, is going to go into the breakdown of that. Now in here, we're actually going to get some clarification going back to when we first read about this levy over here, that it would be very important, right? So we'll pay close attention to that. Verse 16, for Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and taken Gezer and burnt it with fire and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city and given it for a present unto his daughter, Solomon's wife. Now, keep in mind that we were commanded to wipe out the heathen nations that were in the land of Canaan and to take over those cities. That didn't end up happening, right? We wiped out a good portion of them, but not all of them. So we were still neighbors, right? We still had neighbors of the Canaanites that were still living in the land in some of these cities. And over time, we would take some of the cities, they would have some of the cities, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's why I mentioned here the Canaanites being slain. Now, at this point, remember, Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter, right? And so as a present, right, you could think of it like a marriage present, whatnot. Pharaoh ended up having that city of Gezer, cleared out and then given to his daughter. And Solomon built Gezer and Beth Horon, the nether. Let's look at that word, nether. All right, we have your lowest, nether. Let's see what else they have. Bottom, most, lowest. Okay, it says here the lower pool in Jerusalem of pavement and gate of outer. So it could have been that in terms of maybe the geographical layout, right? That, oops, what happened here? This Beth Horon, let's actually look at this Beth Horon. Might have been the lower region of that city or that particular area. Yeah, it says house of hollowness, 2 towns in Ephraim. Yeah, okay, interesting. So you had upper Beth Horon, town on the mountains of Ephraim, and then you have lower Beth Horon, town located 800 feet lower than upper Beth Horon. So that's why it calls it Beth Horon, the nether. In this case, Beth Horon, the lower. And it might not be a direct sort of correlation here, but an example is you may think of Germania Major, Germania Minor, something like that. So verse 18, and Baalath and Tadmor in the wilderness in the land, and all the cities of store that Solomon had, and the cities stored like storehouses, right? So that also makes sense, right? You have certain cities that the majority of the portion there is dedicated to store goods and non-perishable goods and so on, right? And the cities for his chariots and the cities for his horsemen, and that which Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem and in Lebanon and in all of his dominion. And all the people that were left, now here's a key part, right? All the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which were not of the children of Israel, their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel also were not able utterly to destroy, upon those did Solomon levy a tribute of bond service unto this day. So there's the clarification, right? So going back a couple of chapters, initially I'd mentioned that Solomon raised this levy out of like Israel, right, men. But in actuality, it wasn't Israelites, right, but rather the heathens that were the residue of the heathens that were living amongst us, those we weren't able to wipe out. They were the ones that Solomon actually used as the labor, right, the physical labor to do, as 1 Kings the 9th chapter tells us and clarifies for us. Verse 22, but of the children of Israel did Solomon make no bondmen, but they were men of war, and his servants, and his princes, and his captains, and rulers of his chariots and his horsemen. See, so those positions were mentioned, right, as we read, and some names were actually mentioned. But so what Solomon ended up doing was those that would actually like go and hew the timber and carry them and transport them, physically doing all of these things, those were the heathens, right, the ones living amongst us, that were made into those bondmen. But the different roles that were more of like maybe like a taskmaster, as it says here, a servant, this would be like somebody who's in charge of Solomon's provisions, right? or his his horses, or so on like that. Those would be the roles that the Israelites would play. Verse 23, these were the chief of the officers that were over Solomon's work, 550, which bear rule over the people that wrought in the work. So those that actually did the physical labor. But Solomon's daughter, but Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David onto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Millo. And 3 times in a year did Solomon offer burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar which he built unto the Lord Yahweh. And he burnt incense upon the altar that was before the Lord. So he finished the house, the temple that is. And King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezion Geber, which is beside Eloth, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. Because remember, he had dominion over this whole region at this time. Now, I pulled up here on the map Ezion Geber, however you want to pronounce it. And they located right here, right at the edge, this little mini coast over here. This being like the region of like Edom, right? And so when you come, I think it's should be right around here. But when you come down, this Sea of Aqaba, which then connects with the Red Sea down here, and I believe this is the Sinai Peninsula down here, is basically where at least some of the diagrams put it. Let me take a look here and see. Yeah. So here, this would be, yeah. So what we just looked at would be, you had this strip, right, that leads into the Red Sea, and this would be that Gulf that we just looked at. And so this tiny little spot over here is where approximately, right, or it is approximated to be Ezion Geber, because then it could easily flow into this body of water. And as we're going to read, where exactly they ended up going with that navy. Verse 27, and Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with Solomon's servants, because they were a seafaring people, right, the Phoenicians. And as it says, they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. Now, this location, Ophir, was one that's debated, right? It's uncertain exactly to, a lot of back and forth about where it could possibly be. Now, we believe this to be the Americas, okay? Of course, it would make sense now that they would have a navy and they would be able to sail through here. And it would also make sense as to why, when you go into the future, when as we'll see as we get to the end of the book of Kings, particularly 2 Kings, when the Assyrians had come and taken the northern kingdom and deported them and took them into the land of Assyria, upon the fall of Assyria, the bulk of the tribes of the northern kingdom sailed from the east and came here to the Americas, to the west, right? Arsareth, I think is what the land is referred to in the Apocrypha, which means another land, right? So then the question comes, how did they know of this land, the Americas' existence, right? And being able to just sail here, it's not like they were just going anywhere. They knew where they were going. So coming back to this time of King Solomon, they also knew of the existence of this place to be able to, as it says, fetch the gold from thence. Now, when you look into the word Ophir in the blue letter, they mention like some part of Saudi Arabia and so on. But if you reason about it a little bit too, you might ask yourself, well, Saudi Arabia is at this point in time is not a no man's land. That land is already inhabited. So if there's gold over there, which there is, and there are already inhabitants over there, then there's a great chance that that gold has already been like capitalized upon. But this verse in 28 sounds more like a what do they call those? An expedition, if that's the right word, where you actually sail to a place that is sort of, almost untouched, where you can actually go and get those chunks of resources that you need and then bring it back and so on. Okay. And so that brings us to the end of the book of 1 Kings, the 9th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.